to the Beyond Football podcast. We're out here really going beyond football in a different location, not in our original studio, but we're out here at BP Collins special studio with Molly and Emma Eastwood and the main man Toby Shaw Silva.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Beyond Football podcast.
Thank you.
You know, BP Collins is a law firm known for solving problems, managing risks, and seeking favourable outcomes for their clients. The sports department provide legal services related to contracts, sponsorship deals, intellectual property rights, dispute resolution, and regulatory compliance. Is that pretty much what you guys do?
And we've got a family team.
Yeah, we're a multi-service firm here at BP Collins, so we offer all kinds of departments, from criminal law to family law to company commercial property, and we could go on and on, couldn't we, about what we offer. So our tagline is lawyers for life.
Nice.
So for both proactive steps to take to have a lawyer in your life and reactive steps when things might go wrong, or if you're in a hard part of your life, we would hope to be here.
Nice top.
That's powerful, man. Being proactive rather than being reactive. Something that aligns with what we're trying to do here at On Beyond Football. But why would we ever have lawyers on a football podcast?
So great.
Where did I would love to know, where did your journeys in football, playing football, or even just getting to know about the game, being involved with it, where did it all start for both of you?
Shall I take it away?
Take it away.
So I started playing when I was 6. I used to play football. I played up until I was 15. And then we had the problem of girls' football. That's an issue all round. They started merging age groups because there weren't enough coaches and there weren't enough resources for girls' football. So after the merge, I just wasn't enjoying it as much, and I started to explore what other options I could take in football, and I became a referee.
A ref?
Yes.
Sorry, I haven't always been a huge fan of refs.
I know.
For obvious reasons.
You obviously haven't come across the right one.
No.
So I did that for I was 14 and I stopped when I was 20 during COVID. And then I started at the law firm, so I didn't really ref much anymore. I wasn't playing. And only a couple of weeks ago, I was approached by someone from my old team asking me to come back, so I just joined again.
Ooh,
yeah, so
wow.
I'm playing again.
So you're doing the best of both worlds now.
Well, I'm not reffing anymore.
Okay.
But
you're playing and working
I'm working, yeah.
at BP Collins.
Yes.
That's amazing.
So you're going beyond football.
I am.
You're perfect for this
Exactly.
podcast. I feel like this.
More than a footballer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've really been trying
You're
to.
perfect candidate.
That's it. So we've been trying to, dive into the female football world. You know, in season 1, we've had a few female footballers who've played for Crystal Palace, West Ham.
Yeah.
And we've really been trying to get Charlotte Lynch on
Nice.
our podcast. But yeah, it's great to have
Yeah.
a female, getting that female perspective, because as you said, like, there's a big problem and prejudice in the women's game. So.
I think growing up, I didn't realise it was so useful to have first-hand experience. I just saw it as I used to play football a little bit when I was young. I enjoyed it. Now that I'm getting into the sports space from a legal perspective, I realise that my first-hand experience of being a woman playing football, it's invaluable to talk about, and it needs to be spoken about on as many platforms as possible. So, yeah, I think it's useful.
Amazing. How about yourself, Emma? How's football kind of entered into your life?
Well, I'm not good at football. I don't play football. I don't know the rules around football, but I am married to a footballer. So me and Si, he plays for Oxford United, Simon Eastwood.
Yeah.
We have been together since I was 17. I'm now 32. So I would like to think I've got a lot of experience about understanding a player's kind of world. It's quite a bubble, I would say, from my own experience. They're quite wrapped up and protected. So from being a lawyer, having a lawyer perspective to help footballers, from my own experience of being married to one and being in a relationship with one for such a long space of time. And Sai has played for non-league clubs and, championship clubs, League 1 clubs, League 2 clubs. So I'd like to think I also have experience of what different kind of levels would require. So I'm here from that kind of space. Don't know about football, can't give you any tips, but can speak about Oxford United.
See, this is what happens when you speak to lawyers, man. They don't want to
give a professional answer, innit?
You're supposed to plead the fifth, man.
You didn't ask me.
Told you, that was six.
Plead the fifth. That's a bad answer.
No, it's amazing. And then I guess we spoke about how football came in, but in the simplest of ways, how would you define a role of a lawyer? What is a lawyer? If there's a footballer that's like, okay, I'm not too sure what a lawyer is, how would you define it in its simplest form?
I think the term lawyer can be quite scary because you initially think, you associate a lawyer with something going wrong in life, something quite sad happening, something scary happening. But what I would say is, especially from a footballer's point of view, you can take steps with a lawyer to plan for your future, plan ahead of football, what's your career going to look like after football. But also if anything bad does happen, we're here, I'm in the family team, so there's been a lot of big media stories at the minute around family lawyers and footballers. How can we help you? And hopefully by that time we would be a trusted advisor. So you've come to us already, you've used our firm to help you. It might be something as simple as a will, a property purchase, and then we can help you when things do go wrong. So we try and pride ourselves on being down to earth, don't we? Approachable. We don't speak in legal jargon. We speak to anybody.
Yeah, I think it's quite old-fashioned view that lawyers are this sort of high-level contacts, but we can just be someone you have in your phone that you can run things past. It doesn't need to be a full instruction. It can be just casual. I think it's great to build those connections when you're not in a time of need and desperation. I think it's good to consider who's out there, who you need, to have in your phone book before stuff hits the fan. Sometimes people just start Googling as soon as something bad happens, and I don't think it should be like that. I think it should be a relationship you work on throughout your journey as you grow older, and even from a very young age. I think it's good to start considering who's out there, what we can offer, and build it from there.
That's class.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That message of being proactive rather than waiting until you need it is something that's really close to our hearts beyond football. But football being the industry it's working class. They always say that's why everyone loves it, the fans, etc. How do you make understanding the law accessible to people who see law or lawyers as something that the upper class only have access to due to lawyer fees being quite expensive? I had a recent experience just writing up something like a service agreement costs thousands of pounds. So how do you guys approach making it more accessible for players or just young people who play sports?
Yeah, we appreciate that, don't we? That it's not cheap. And someone I work with actually said the other day it's either cheap, fast or good, and you don't get all three. So in my experience, having a lawyer, regardless of the fees, is so worthwhile. We've trained for a long period of time. It took me 9 years to train, for example. Our knowledge is what you pay for, and coming to a firm with a good reputation will hopefully give you a good outcome. I think the law is changing to become more accessible, so different routes into law. So it's not just a traditional route anymore. Yeah. You're seeing a lot of different people, a different kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Background?
Yeah, people in different backgrounds are coming through to become solicitors, to become barristers. And I would say, especially in this firm, we're very down to earth, we're very approachable, we won't be throwing the law at clients. If it's somebody who doesn't necessarily understand it, we will allow you to understand in a way that's tailored to you. And that's what I would say we pride ourselves on.
Yeah, and I think, so I'm based in dispute resolution, and I paralegaled in dispute resolution for around 15 months as well, so I've got quite a good experience in what comes in. And often you have people that have tried to take the cheap option when doing the contracts or the initial stages, and then if it hasn't been done well, that's then what leads to a dispute in the future, and a dispute is much more expensive to deal with, and you might not have control of how big it gets, and you'd rather do it right in the first place to avoid it developing into a dispute, because that's a whole different ball game. So don't cut corners. Be sure that you are represented by the right person.
But how can you not cut corners when it's so expensive in the first place?
Yeah, it's a good question to be fair.
Yeah.
Well, in my experience, footballers earn quite well.
Yeah,
True.
So, and you know, the higher you earn, from a family point of view, you should protect yourself. The higher you earn, you might need more protection from a family law point of view. For example, a prenuptial agreement. So actually having that in place prior to, you know, looking to get married, or having a lawyer that you can approach to speak about, is this the right option for me, will probably save you, it could be hundreds of thousands in the long run, depending on how well you do in your career.
Yeah.
So I would say cost-benefit analysis of having a lawyer involved.
Definitely getting a good lawyer, because I guess what makes a good lawyer though, because I guess from a footballer, anything that's presented is like, okay, we'll just go with them. So what actually would you say makes a good lawyer? If there's a footballer listening saying, okay, I think I should look for a lawyer because I need some advice or help, what actually are they looking for, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, and I would say from my experience, you know, understanding how it is in football, it is like a bubble. If you ask somebody for something, you're going to ask someone in your club, you're not necessarily going to look outside of that club, and you would expect a player liaison staff member, for example, to have all of the answers. So I think for us to work with athletes in any sports, it's important for us to have good relationships with those kind of people in the club. But a good lawyer is someone you trust, someone you can get on with. I think any business relationship starts with actually getting on with that person, and especially from my point of view in family, you're probably going to be telling them your deepest, darkest secrets that you wouldn't tell. You might not tell your friends, you might not tell a parent. Exactly.
I think also it's important not to fall for people that are promising you the world, because sometimes that's a red flag, because it might be a quick way to get clients to promise them they can do this in this little time or for this small price, and just be open to the idea that they might not have your best interests. And also with the liaison within clubs, I think as well it's important for players to take responsibility for themselves sometimes, so that there's someone else outside of the club, and like what your whole ethos beyond football, you know, take yourself outside of that, have responsibility for yourself, and have a look at what's out there besides who the club is telling you to use, because they ultimately will always have
their best
the club's interest at the forefront of their minds. So
it's so interesting, because it's something we speak about all the time about who's responsible for certain things. So we talk about when players get injured, or if they run out of contract or there's contract issues, where do you go? Because if people aren't accountable, they're not going to take responsibility, you know. And I think what you're talking about is independence, having people that are independent, that can kind of fight your corner for you and not have ulterior motives.
Yeah,
you know,
because in law we have this thing called conflict of interest. And you can't act if there's a conflict, and you would argue that there's going to be a conflict between clubs and players, but when you're all in this bubble, all using the same lawyers and whoever else, that's a conflict sometimes, and sometimes you need to have another contact to use, rather than just relying on the club's contacts.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we always speak about, or last week me and Toby were speaking about footballers understanding that they're contracted, they're signing a contract.
Yeah.
In other industries, when you sign a contract, etc., you're expected to have other forms of work, other clients that you're working with, etc. But in football, it's as if they expect you to sign a contract, but then for you to be mutually exclusive to them and not worry about your best interest, but give everything to football. But what you guys were saying there, there's a lot of grey areas or opportunities for there to be conflict. So yeah, what I've got from that in terms of Toby's question about what a lawyer is, they seem like that mediator during those difficult moments or those situations where you don't actually know what's happening. You get offered a contract, you get offered this boot deal. What does this actually mean?
It's funny because that's what I was going to throw over back to you guys in terms of like, we sign contracts, but how many people actually read the full contract? Or like what's actually in it? And we're always like, how can you play a game when you don't know what game you're playing?
Yeah.
Like, you sign on the left, the club signs on the right. They've written the contract.
As long as it says professional contract on there.
Yeah, most people, to be honest, if there's footballers listening here, most of them would probably just look at how much you're getting paid and where to sign.
Contract.
You know. And my view of it is someone that has successfully made it to signing a football contract, that's, for example, my partner, that's his dream. He would absolutely love that. And I think a lot of people, a lot of young boys and girls and men and women are signing those contracts and they're just blown away that they're even signing a football contract, and they would sign anything because it's their dream come true. And they're also then surrounded by people that are telling them to sign this contract, and they may not take a step back and actually look at what they're signing or consider whether there are terms that need to be negotiated. And again, that's just why they need to have some support that's on their side before entering into these contracts, because they might be in that contract for 5-6 years and they're in a messy situation, and then it turns to a dispute, and that's when it gets messy. So it's crucial.
No, it's good. And Emma, is there any experiences, I guess, from your experience?
Well, I normally read them, but I would say from my experience, a lot of footballers rely on their agents to kind of relay the information that's in the contract, but their agent might not necessarily be legally trained either. So I think it's quite important. I know from, Si, he's really good friends with his agent, he really gets along with him, he goes to him about a lot of things. And it would be, we in our family team work together. If we have a client, we might have a divorce coach, we might have a financial advisor, and I think for a footballer it might also be helpful for their agent to be involved, have a relationship with the lawyer so they really feel like they've got someone they can go to over silly questions. No question is a silly question, is it? But I guess when you're paying a lawyer for a question, there's a bit more pressure on there, so... Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really read terms and conditions either. That's a full disclaimer. I shouldn't admit to that being a lawyer, but who does?
Yeah, that's what
we
when
also
you sign
just
for
go
a
straight
car.
to I agree.
Yeah.
So do you guys, when you go on a website, do you guys just agree to everything?
No
Yes.
comment.
Plead the fifth.
We'll edit that one out.
What? No, because I used to do that. I used to do that all the time. Just agree. But it wasn't until I met. I went and stayed with my uncle, and he studied law, all these different things. And he's just like, they take all your data, all these deeper stuff. That's when you start.
Yeah, it's scary.
We start speaking on this podcast about law. I watch a YouTube video and BP Collins adverts on there, like they're listening. But I think but yeah, it's very interesting in terms of the law side and even that idea of data. But let me not sidetrack. We've dived into obviously what a lawyer is, what we do. I really like to dive into the stories of your journey, especially you mentioned that you've been with Simon since 17.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like a great insight into what it looks like, because he's playing League 1, League 2. He's a goalkeeper. He's someone that position I aspire to to get to on the football pitch, but obviously navigating that and having a successful relationship as well in an uncertain world of football. How does that happen, and how did it start, and were you receptive to the idea of him pursuing football?
When I met Si, he was 19, I was 17. I think he was playing for the youth team for Huddersfield, so that's where we're from, hence the accent. And to be honest, I just liked him. I didn't really think of the job. I think nowadays everyone thinks it's this glamorous world, but actually when you're living in it, it's very, very different. And I could do a whole podcast on that, and I'd love to write a book on it one day.
Let's
honestly, well, leak. We'll both get cancelled. So I was probably naive. I mean, I was 17. I wasn't an adult yet myself, but I was very naive about how restrictive football life is. It's very routine. They can't take a day off. You know, when we had so we've got 2 daughters. I had Alicia is our eldest daughter when I was 21. A lot of families in football seem to have children young. I think cult's the wrong word to describe it, but you enter into it, and I describe it as Big Brother.
Wow.
You're all forced together. You're expected to get on, and you all, you know, when I was 17, going to, I think our first move was to Oxford, and seeing like the older girls and wives in Oxford who were my age now, just in awe of them. That's not me, but
You don't use that. What's wrong with that term?
It's so rude.
Wags.
It's so rude. It's so rude. You
But
can't just tell them as wags.
I didn't say it. I'm just using that's a technical term now, especially after the Euros.
In the media, I think
Yeah,
it is. But like and the girls I know of, you know, we're all like educated. We're
but some
all
girls
really
my
work
age,
hard.
they're like, I want to become a wag one day.
Yeah, and that's
Like,
why I'd love
that's
to do
the
a
career
book or
path.
like a podcast on it to actually say how it is, because you know the money's great, the freedom of it's not full-time hours is absolutely great when you've got a family, but actually the reality of being in football, and especially me trying to have a career whilst I was in football. So just as an example, it took me 9 years to train. In that time we've been at Blackburn Rovers, Oxford United, Portsmouth, Bradford, Huddersfield, and you have to move your life around with them, and you really see the effects of that. And I think, you know, Si is really proactive in developing his career after football, which is, you know, around your guys' ethos. He's absolutely, I would say, like influential on that, to be honest.
I think it's because he's a goalkeeper.
I don't know if it's practice.
Goalkeepers, isn't it?
Yeah. So I've been lucky that he's always planned for something after football. But yeah, I don't know, what tea do you want? Do you want some gossip about our lives? Like, do you want...
I would say, like, I know you spoke about just the idea of the cult in terms of the wags, excuse my language, but with the situation with footballers' wives and handling the dynamic of moving about, was there any point where you were like, oh wow, this is not what I signed up for? Yeah,
I think quite early on into our relationship he got a move to Oxford. I was 18. So we've been at Oxford now for, this will be his 10th season, but prior to this we were here for a year and it didn't really work out. And you know, you think, so exciting, I'm moving to Oxford, but actually, you know, we were kids. No one's helping you get a house. And it has changed now. We've got a really good player liaison member of staff, James Constable, shout out James. James used to be a player at Oxford when we were initially there.
Oh wow.
So you think it's so exciting, we're moving, but actually reality, I would say, hits in 2 months. I wasn't playing. He was only 20. You know, we expected him to go and play. So those difficulties, you know, you start to see a different side of football, really. I don't want to sit here and slag football because it's
when you say reality sets in, because obviously me and Toby, when a footballer's not playing, you're basically told, this week you're not allowed to do your job.
There's no work for you this week.
There's no work.
Yeah,
I worked all week.
So difficult. I actually me and Si had a conversation this weekend, and I said, you know, if it was me, and I'd trained 9 years to be a lawyer, and you know, you guys put in the hard graft week in, week out, your diets great, you're training well, you're working hard, and even if you are second choice on the bench, you're still prepping for a game because you never know if you're going on. So the mental health side of football is something I'm a massive advocate of, especially in goalkeeping. I can't really speak for an outfield player, but we've had some really tough experiences with fans, and I don't think the fans necessarily understand how the player actually feels too in that position. You know, you make a horrendous mistake, you go home to your family, you feel awful. Your children are embarrassed of going to school because the dad's a goalkeeper who's let a horrible mistake into a rival club. So yeah, the reality has been, you know, we've been together such a long time now, it's just part of our lives. But looking back, it really was a shock at the beginning of our relationship.
I can imagine, like, I guess footballers are more than footballers. Like, they're human beings. You're a person first. And I think oftentimes fans can lose sight of that, other people can lose sight of that. But even what you're talking about, it goes back to understanding the game that we're playing though. We're contractors. The truth of the matter is, our work's out of our hands because we're just there to be available if a manager wants to choose us. That's actually the role that we're playing. I don't know if you guys, like, I've never worked in any other industry to be honest, but if you went to work, you'd have work to do, right?
Yeah.
You know, you feel like you're progressing or that you're working going forward. So
yeah, and I guess there's more rights involved in our contracts and employment rights.
that's interesting.
Oh, that's another amazing topic.
Paternity leave, for example, the law is it should be 2 weeks, but actually the reality of football is if you took 2 weeks, you would never play again. So it's that side of it.
So,
with the law,
is from you guys' experience, is football above the law?
Oh, I don't think it's that's difficult.
I studied this module
Did you?
on my law
really?
degree.
That's
Well, it was
powerful.
a sports law module, but this was an element of it. And we came round and round, and there is no answer. Is the answer.
Which side would you guys lean on?
I would say it is. I'd say the culture. It shouldn't be. It absolutely shouldn't be. But the culture in football needs to change massively. From my own experience, I can't generalise this, but from my own experience of being involved in it as a family, it needs to change to adhere to the law. But I can't imagine it will anytime soon.
But then, what kind of top 2 things would you actually change from football for it to adhere to the law more, if that makes any sense?
From a family point of view, I would say the paternity leave. From my experience, I had 1 day off, and that was because it was international break, so we were really, really lucky, and he played for Blackburn at the time. Luckily, our second daughter was born in the summer break, so you know, some of us time to try and have a child to fit in with May and June, and it should, you know, any other job you would be entitled to at least 2 weeks. So I think,
and I do think it's treated like the most important thing in the world. And you think there are heart surgeons that can have more time off, and they're saving lives. It's its own little bubble, isn't it? Everything about it, even sort of the media and broadcasting, it's just different to anything else.
I guess football's the world sport though, and because the demand's so high and there's so much money being pumped into it, if you're getting involved in it, and we were talking off air about the players' workload.
what's that?
No problem.
The players' workload and the lawsuit with FIFA, and I guess things like that are probably a byproduct of how successful football is. And I guess if we're now in the industry as players, that's what we signed up for. And I guess I'm always here to really get a good conversation out of it, because I've been playing myself for 12 years as a professional. I come through the ranks, but I didn't think this is what I signed up for. You know, so when we talk about different examples, they just seem like that's the nature of the beast. So it's really interesting when it comes from a law side to say, what can I claw back? You know, what's in my contract that's actually mine? What rights do I have? And when you spoke about employment rights and employment law, it's a really interesting one.
I think we're going to see a massive change in football over the next 10-20 years because of the change in attention span. The younger generation look at football differently, and I think broadcasters, sponsorships, they're going to have to start looking at how they can adapt football to be more suited to the audience. And I think that will have an impact on players. I'm not sure what the change is going to be, but I think we're going to see a big shift in a lot of elements of football.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully we do. You know, at Beyond Football, and the aim of this podcast is to raise awareness of that importance of having that identity beyond football, and into things like this, how footballers can use the law to help them on their journey. I really wanted to touch on the idea of paternity leave and how footballers don't really get access to that. You know, in my psychology degree, we study attachment types.
Yeah.
And they speak about the sensitive period, you know, young children need, and the continuity hypothesis, which talks about how a child's attachment type, if it's not correctly nurtured during the first 2 to 3 years of their lives, that can affect them for the rest of their lives. So all these different things, when you consider these concepts, these scientifically proven things, but football doesn't understand or address the need for a father to be around their children during this critical, they call it the critical period.
Yeah.
So someone who, you know, has separation anxiety from their father, etc., that can affect their relationship with their children for the rest of their lives. So when I heard they only got 1 day, and you can't even.
And that was lucky, really. You know?
Like, yeah, it's you know, me and Toby, we talk about this a lot, but there's so much pressure where football is basically above your family.
Well, look at Phil Foden. He flew home and it was all hush-hush why he was flying home, and he was back within a day or two, just after the birth of his baby. And that just wouldn't happen in any other career.
And he got a lot of backlash for that, did he?
Yeah.
I guess football's the show must go on though.
Yeah, we all accept it, and we do. As you know, the girlfriends and wives that I know, we all accept it. We've had really hard times where the children might be ill, you know, really personal bereavements, for example. And like you said, it's like a performance. You run there to perform, you get paid to perform, and that's what you go and do. And then you come home and you're sad.
Yeah.
And you know, we do the same in our jobs, don't we? Some days you do have to work really hard because you've got a really sensitive case on or something that's really important. And you do, I mean, I'm guilty of it. I put my job above my family sometimes, and that I know from living with Si, he's had to do the same, and that's what we do. When you want to be successful, that's what you do. But yeah, behind closed doors, it can really affect things. I've been lucky. I had family support when I had my youngest, and then when I was the second time mum, you know, he was off for the summer, so it was fine. But I know people that have really struggled, so. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because in my master's in sports business management and policy, the policy side of things really perked my interest, because I said, what rights do I have as a player, and what voice do I actually have when I want to bring about a change that affects me? So we're talking about paternity leave. If it was mandatory 2 weeks, legally, it's done. That's the truth. But if it's not, then we're just going to be talking about it until the cows come home. So I'm like, how do we actually bring about change for the better things for players? Because we can sit and accept it, like you said, or we can actually speak up and say what can be done. And I guess it's the powers to be that can enforce the law, but from a player's stance and from a legal stance.
And I think it's that thing of players just taking responsibility for themselves, considering things deeper, and think about what they want from their career, rather than just being grateful that they've been selected. They're grateful they've been selected for a team, and that they'll just, because even in a legal career, it sort of relates at the start. When you're desperate for a training contract, you need to get a training contract to be able to qualify as a solicitor. You feel like you would take anything. You're just so desperate for experience or a training contract. And I feel like that level of like passion and excitement is what I'd imagine a footballer would feel when they've been selected for a team that they feel is a step up, or and they're not going to consider how they can adapt their contract to be more suited to them. and they'll just sit quiet for their career. And it's not until they get older, get a bit of confidence, that they start to think, wait a minute, that wasn't right. And it's just, like you say, thinking beyond football, thinking about what I can do to just make this the best scenario for me. And you need a lot of support and advisors to assist you when making those decisions.
No, definitely. That was a great introduction, guys.
That's a good intro. Actually, to finish off this, I actually really wanted to ask, because I'm always fascinated. How did you guys get into law? Like, where did that start?
What a question.
My experience is a very non-traditional route. So I was at college, I did a law A-level, and actually at college I was quite naughty. My attendance was 24%.
Oh, wow.
Is that because of football?
Nothing to do with football whatsoever.
Well, because I thought it was Simon after that.
Well, I met him whilst I was in my second year, so whilst I was doing my A-levels, but it was nothing to do with him. I can't place the blame on that one. And then I just didn't know what I wanted to do, so I was a beautician, I worked in a bank, I worked in a factory packing books. And that was actually when we lived in Oxford, because I had no means of income. Size income wasn't great. So I worked 8 hours a day putting books into boxes in a factory. So I never, honestly, when I was on that factory floor, I never in a million years thought I would become a lawyer, but I always knew I wanted to do something with children and families. So when my youngest child was born, I thought I want to be a social worker, I want to do something really rewarding, and then just naturally transitioned into the law from that. So when we moved to Oxford in 2016, I started my law degree, and then here we are. I always knew I wanted to be a family lawyer. Quite love the drama, quite a nosy person. So it's like my dream job. So grateful that I get to do this every day.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Mine's slightly different. I fell for all the drama programs on TV that, you know, being a lawyer entailed, and I wanted to be a criminal defence solicitor.
Suits?
Well, that's not quite criminal defence, but
Harvey Specter, no?
I think that's more sort of like disputes.
Yeah, more business. Isn't it?
Yeah,
No,
disputes.
but there was a couple of criminals that like breached conduct.
Potentially, I did stop watching it after only a couple of episodes.
So,
You didn't finish it?
No, it's so long, and I think it's
It's
slightly
one of the
annoying
best,
when you're in the legal
okay.
career. You think that wouldn't be done like that, or it's a bit annoying. So I thought I wanted to be a criminal defence solicitor. I joined a really great firm whilst at university called Wells Burkham. They're a criminal defence firm.
Touched on so many different things, like understanding from the wives of a footballer, their perspectives, how lawyers can help footballers go beyond football, the importance of good relationships and trust when you're dealing with a lawyer, and also the fact that being in football and having a long-term relationship, it makes you have to grow up quickly, and it makes you it allows you to be exposed to different situations that people outside of football don't experience. But we really wanted to dive into these different areas that are most commonly spoken about in football.
Yeah. Well,
you know, we're gonna dive into.
No, before you dive into what we think, what do you guys think are the most common law issues in football?
Perfect.
Because I've obviously got my experiences either with lawyers or things that I think are quite legal. From actual legal stuff, what would you say are top three?
Well, I think our views will vary depending on the areas we've covered. As part of a solicitor, we've carried out training contracts, and that's where you sit in different areas of law for a period of time. So Emma and I would have seen different things, and we can see what relates to a footballer. My experience, I've spent most of my time in disputes or criminal defence. So a huge one that I've noticed is driving offences, for example. Lots of young players, sometimes getting lots of money, don't know what to spend it on, and they sometimes spend it on a fast car, and they don't realise the risks that can come with that, and they get caught up in a situation. And here at BP Collins, we are well equipped to help you in those situations. We've dealt with cases like that before, and it can often lead to a positive outcome for the player, and it will teach them not to do it again.
What is, because it links to what we were saying about potential football being above the law, has it been special circumstances where players have got out of driving offences because they're footballers?
No, not from my experience. Everyone's dealt with pretty similar.
Nice.
But things are considered, a broad range of things are considered when getting sentenced for a driving offence, and things you wouldn't think are considered, such as what your job entails, whether you need to be driving, whether you are responsible for anybody if you have young children and they need to attend school and you're their main provider and their main carer. Lots of things are taken into consideration when situations like that happen. So it's very useful if you find yourself in that situation to speak to someone as soon as possible, and we can help you run through what the next steps look like and how we're going to deal with it.
So they have quite a holistic approach to sentencing people.
Yes, exactly. They take a lot of that individual circumstances into account before giving a final sentence, which it's not just black and white. You've driven this speed on this road, this is your sentence. It varies.
Are there any numbers in terms of like the amount of footballers you get driving offences, like statistics?
I have no
or
idea.
any?
I have absolutely no idea, but
I think I've only met one footballer that's ever said that they haven't had some sort of driving offence.
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's why we have to pay an arm and a leg for insurance. That's why? Is that why? Is it legal for them to charge us that much? Is it legal?
Because if you get injured, you're probably worth a lot more than the ordinary person. So that's why they have to charge.
Even
That's
as a
not
scholar,
my legal advice, but from my personal understanding.
as a scholar, when I was 17, I'm having to pay
It's expensive.
over £3,000 for a polo.
Yeah.
My first year of
You
insurance
need to
at
put, your mum,
17.
your grandma,
Yeah.
everyone. Is
Go
that
get
legal?
black
Like, it's not
Okay.
legal to charge people that much, man.
No, it's a lot.
I guess, Emma, from your perspective, what kind of topics crop up from the stories?
I would look at it as trying to protect yourself. So I would look at a family point of view. If you're not married, look at a prenup agreement. If you're thinking about getting married, if you've got a long-term partner or a short-term partner and you're looking at moving in together, think about a cohabitation agreement, for example, to protect your interest in the property. Think about wills, from our private client team, to protect your assets should the unfortunate happen, particularly if you've got children or you're not married. And then also something I commonly see from my experience is footballers setting up businesses either on the side, like buy-to-lets for example, or going into businesses with their teammates. And something I actually told Si to do was to get a shareholders agreement, so our company commercial team can help with that. Because whilst you might think that my teammate, nothing will ever go wrong, you just never know. So they would be my top three.
Yeah, and that's why a firm like BP Collins, being a full service firm, that's where we're great for these situations. All these things that can arise throughout anybody's life, not just the players. We're your sort of one-stop shop. You don't have to keep making connections with new people and taking a chance on new people. You can have one connection at this firm and we can put you in touch with who you need within the firm, and we can deal with all your legal needs.
Wow. I hope they're giving you all the commission for
Yeah,
BP Collins sales team. I think we're gonna. I've stamped it, so we're gonna send that to them. And you can get yourself. I hope you're part of the sales team because that was top tier. I was like, what? I need to get on to BP Collins.
It's good.
No, that's amazing. But you mentioned prenups and the cohabitation agreement, something I've never heard of. But prenups is often a conversation that's had, between young folk. I remember when I was back in secondary school, everyone used to ask back in secondary, we were like, what, because obviously back in the day, that's when I was playing for Chelsea, etc. So people were like, you have girlfriends back in the day, like, if you get married, are you going to sign a prenup? Girls always act hesitant about it and stuff like that. But from your perspective, do you think it's something that all footballers should have? Is it offensive to ask your partner for one?
I did a bit of research before coming on this pod, and I read that a third of footballers get divorced within 12 months of retiring. And then that statistic increases to 70% within 3 years of them retiring.
Wow.
So in comparison, I've not compared this to a normal, ordinary profession, let's say a doctor, for example, but I can imagine it's because of it's such a big transition that it affects probably your most personal relationships. So I think it's not a romantic topic to discuss a prenup, but I think they're becoming more in the limelight, and I think they should be viewed as an insurance policy rather than something it's not distrusting, it's just to protect your assets should something arise. I think a common misconception, because actually they're not legally binding in England and Wales, but if certain criteria is met, then they hold a lot of weight in divorce proceedings, is, I'm just going to be left with nothing if I'm the weaker financial party. That doesn't happen. It's still got to meet your needs. But for the more, financially stronger party, I think it's really sensible to at least think about it. And I think, like you said, that's where a firm like we come in, because you might just want to explore your options. You might not want to go down that route, but to have a trusted legal advisor to discuss the pros and cons with. And from a practical point of view, we appreciate when you get married, you want it to be exciting. You don't necessarily want to approach your fiancé and say, I think we need a prenup, I don't trust you, we're going to split up in 10 years. But from a sensible legal standpoint, it's an insurance policy, so it should just be viewed as that, in my opinion.
And what you said there about going through the pros and cons with a legal advisor, as solicitors, we don't tell you what you should do. All we do is lay out all the options for you, give you pros and cons for each option, and it's for us to all communicate with each other and decide what one is best suited to you, and that might be different based on our clients. So you're never forced into anything, it's completely your decision, but you're just being made aware of what's out there, which is, I think that's great, just grow your knowledge.
70% after 3 years. I thought, I've done research as well, and it talks about, like, in general, 40% are divorced, bankrupt, etc. But 70% after 3 years, that's
like 8 out of the starting 11.
That is absolutely
crazy.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
So then, if 8 out of 11 get divorced, then every footballer needs a prenup then, because the likelihood is you're going to need it.
Yeah.
Or you're going to end up bankrupt if you don't.
It's interesting.
Yeah, a prenup just protects what was accrued pre-marriage. There's all different things it can protect, and it also looks to the future.
Wow.
So we look at changes. You might enter a prenup where you've not had children. We look at what might happen if you do have children. It can be a changing document, so I think that's something to really keep in mind as well. You'd get insurance for an injury insurance, you'd have insurance on your car, so why would you not have insurance for assets that you bring into a marriage? So I would see it like that rather than something that's really negative.
I think it links nicely to thinking of marriage as a business, because people get married in terms of business terms. Like, I know I listen to a few podcasts, etc., that they speak about. Understand? I'm gonna get cancelled.
No, I'm listening.
Like, seeing marriage as a business, like your wife as a business partner to do life with, and having that situation where it's mutually beneficial. But when you spoke about protecting your assets, it's like, if this marriage is a business where we're working together to build this, our lives are like our businesses, our babies. So it's like, it helps me to understand the importance of it.
And I think as well, if you're not thinking about marriage, and if marriage is not for you, the other option is a cohabitation agreement, because you might want to move in with your girlfriend, you might be, given equal or unequal shares into the deposit on the house, what kind of contributions you make, especially you know if you are the bigger earner. And a cohabitation agreement just sets out what might happen if that relationship does break down. So that's something else to
Is
think
that what
about.
Ronaldo has with Georgina?
Ronaldo's not that client.
No, but I think it's in the news. I've read a lot about, because he did an interview with Piers Morgan recently, not too long ago, and he said he asked a question to Ronaldo saying, "Are you thinking about making her your wife, etc." He was like, "Yeah, maybe, maybe." But so I think in Saudi he was above the law, so they're not allowed to cohabitate in Saudi, etc. But because he's Ronaldo,
he was able to.
He was able to, but it's probably something that maybe he has. But it's really interesting in terms of, from your perspectives, like unique experiences. Why do you think the rate is so high?
From my experience, and mine would be a personal experience from what I've seen whilst being with Si, would be because 1 minute, you know, you have all the attention, the fans love you, the adrenaline's rushing when you're playing the games, and overnight you're nothing. And it's really sad actually. You know, you kind of binned off. Like, what do you have if you've not taken proactive steps during your career, which is really hard to do because all you want to do is focus on football. What do you have afterwards? And you know, you probably, I can imagine it's linked to depression. That would have an effect on marriages. Ordinarily you take out the demons on the people closest to you, don't you? You know, your wife or husband.
And you can't imagine that happening in another career. Imagine we hit 37 and we come in and they say, "Oh, don't bother coming in tomorrow," and then that's the end of that, and that's not very far away. So this is what they're going through, which just you know, only you guys can relate to that.
Yeah, no, I find it so interesting because I think from a very young age I heard statistics like that, with other statistics about gambling, about alcohol abuse, about drug abuse, and I'm always like, how can a system you get involved in churn you out like that? You know, if it's related to so many people, I think more needs to be done. You know, and I guess I laugh and joke about you actually bringing out a podcast, but I think actually understanding the dynamics of what it actually means to support a footballer and having an identity beyond football is so important. And it's important for a player to understand that they're more than a footballer. They're more than just a game that they play. They're more than scoring goals or making saves.
Because the other side is, you know, you should work on your life outside of football, but players are also, you know, looked down upon for doing that. If you look at Rashford, he was doing amazing things for society, but ultimately it came down to, well, you're playing rubbish now, so it must be distracting you. You're in a contract with us, pull back. And like Jesse Lingard with his fashion, and you know, it's all great, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, no, your career is affected now, drop it or move your way down the leagues. So it's just such like catch-22 all the time.
I think
and I always say in response to that, a player could be playing rubbish and not doing anything off the pitch. You know, there can be many different things that affect their form. You know, whether something happens in their family or their finances or different mental health issues, like these things affect people's performance. So for you to try and be proactive and for that to be knocked down, I think it's quite ludicrous, to be honest.
It's the culture. It's like Molly alluded to. The next 10 years is going to be a big change, and we want there to be a big change in terms of that stigma, that backlash that players receive from doing other things outside of football. I think it's definitely improving a lot. Like with the PFA Business School, with Premier League Futures Programme, all these initiatives from the governing bodies helping to reduce that stigma. But as you said, like, there's still that culture in the change room. If we come in and tell players we're at BP Collins, they're like, what are you doing there? You're being busy, you're like, you're not focused, you should be home resting, you should be watching back your clips from the weekend, we just lost. How are you doing that?
You'll say, well, sign me for the next 20 years and guarantee me a salary for the next 20 years and I'll drop it. But
then they go quiet.
But that's the thing. I think nowadays there's a lot more player activism. You know, and I think that's probably where lawyers probably come in quite a lot to say, what boundaries can we take? What's the current law? What does the law need to be? And what do we need to do in between? You know, because I guess when things are written in law, then people are held account to it. So these things that we're talking about are issues. Oftentimes it's the law that we're going after.
Yeah.
You know, it's the policies that are in place. So I think it's quite interesting because as a player, what kind of powers do you actually have to shift these laws if we're really passionate about it?
Yeah.
And I don't actually know. So it's a question that was thrown out.
Well, the law is getting more involved with football now. We've seen the football governance bill come in, or coming in.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the first step where the government is now getting involved with football. So maybe, I don't know, there's potential that in the future they will have more involvement in relation to the rights of players, because the football governance bill sort of focuses on financial sustainability, which obviously isn't as centred around players, but you never know, it could be something.
But I was wondering, because obviously workplace tension, there's whistleblowing, there's all these things that protect individuals in their different industries. If you're a nurse, been treated wrongly, all these different things, you can go and speak to someone, you can have support, there's union, there's people that you can come to. For example, for me, in this particular situation, what we do on the Beyond Football podcast to raise awareness of things that are kind of unconventional in terms of the norm in the football industry. How can you do that without obviously fear, but also without what rights? It's like what rights do you have in terms of, for example, a manager says to me, "Oh, I'm not going to sign you because of you do a podcast." What rights do we have as a player from that standpoint?
I don't know. It may be something that our employment team can assist you on. I think ultimately it comes down to what's in your contract and what you sign. So if you've signed into a contract that means you can't run something on the side, then that's in your contract and that's for you to challenge and negotiate. But it comes back to you need assistance at the signature rather than finding a problem 2 years down the line, and you can't be working on a side business because you said that you wouldn't. So it just always comes back to get that advice from the get-go rather than getting assistance when you're in trouble. I think that's really important.
But then if it was not in your contract and it's left, it doesn't really mention anything like the situation is ambiguous, but then they try and... It's like, for example, you know, when you're going for an interview, they can't discriminate you based off of your sex, religion, etc. But what stops different clubs discriminating players for having something else other than football? Is there something that happens?
Yeah, in my experience, it does.
Okay.
But that's personal experience, not legal experience. Not speaking as a lawyer, but we spoke earlier, didn't we?
Yeah.
We said, you know, with the paternity rules, you could go to your manager, you could say, well, the law is 2 weeks, but you'd probably never play again. So it's always an internal conflict with, where is my career going? What does the law say? And the law in certain aspects in football doesn't really intertwine in some areas, and I think that's what needs to work.
And I think if you look at players that have a much better reputation higher up the leagues, they have some really interesting clauses in their contracts.
Like what?
Well, just really random things that, like, their wife has to get this and this as part of their contract. You can throw anything in there. If their lawyers are good at negotiating and the clubs really want that player, they can ask for anything to be put in that contract. So that's where it's not, that contract isn't the law, that's just a contract that's been agreed between two parties, and that's what's enforceable because that's the signed contract.
I think that probably goes back to what we always champion to say, it's the player's responsibility to know what they're signing up for and to actually fight for the rights that they want. And I think from a legal stance, when it does come to contracts, I think it's probably on us as players to read our contracts more, you know, and to find out what we're entitled to. So like you said, it's only what's in the contract that's actually enforceable.
Yeah.
Everything else is probably just hearsay. You know, my word against your word, rather than this is what it legally says and this is the legal stance that I can stand upon.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's really interesting, to be honest.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very necessary to understand and get the knowledge of where we stand, especially for me, you know, when I want to have a career in football, I want to progress, but making sure that I'm covered, I'm not shooting myself in the foot, but also giving myself the best possible opportunity to progress. And yeah, I think that's why,
And
players need to access lawyers as well. Yeah.
Because sometimes contracts are written in a way that the clauses are deliberately trying to be difficult to read.
Confusing, yeah.
So you might read it and think, yep, that contract looks great. I think the way this is worded, I can do my business on the side, and then you sign it. But maybe with a deeper look, it will, well, actually, you can't do this, or you can't collab with anyone involved in this, or lots of different terms that could be sort of intertwined that you've missed because it's legal jargon and you've signed it.
So what's some of the common legal jargon that you guys use to confuse people?
You say you guys.
Sorry, not you guys, or lawyers, not you guys, sorry.
I don't know, I don't draft contracts for clubs, but a club might.
Okay, for example, what's some legal jargon that if you've seen it in a contract, then you'd be like, oh, like for example, only applicable if, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think terms like notwithstanding, you know,
What does that even mean?
exactly, to a lay person, which is a person outside of the law, how do you know how to interpret a clause with notwithstanding?
Yeah.
Whereas if you come to one of us, or like an employment or a contract lawyer in our firm, they can really tell you practically this means X, Y, and Z.
and it's not black and white. Like there's clauses that will say, oh, no, get this one out. But when we understand your circumstance, we might say, well, in 5 years, you're not doing this now, but in 5 years you might want to be doing this, which is restricted in your contract. So in that moment, you're not thinking of that. But we have past clients who have had a problem with that, and we know to raise that to you and say, you know, this means this. Are you okay with that being the case? And if you are, you can sign it. And if you're not, we can negotiate that term. You know, it's very case by case.
No, it's really, really interesting, because one of the big things I'm quite big on is like building a team around you. I think Djokovic had one, Beckham had one back in there. I think he was one of the first. Ronaldo's got his own team. All top players now have teams, you know, individuals that work independently for them. And I guess one of the big things is children custody as well. And I think it's in terms of family law, what kind of dynamics is that like in the football world?
I think with football we have to be very flexible because of a footballer's routine. So say an ordinary child arrangements order, the parent that they live with full time, and then they spend time with the other parent. Let's say they live with the mum, they spend time with the father. It's not generalising whatsoever, but on a typical basis, they might spend time with the father every other weekend and on a Wednesday evening. Well, a footballer can't really do that because they've got fixtures to adhere to. They don't get the fixtures until the June before the next season. So it's really understanding that kind of player's background, because if you went to a lawyer that's not, doesn't have knowledge of a footballer's background, they might think you're trying to just be evasive, not agreeing to certain arrangements. If you agreed to them without the knowledge of it, you could be held, you could have a court order being enforced against you, a child arrangements order, because you're not complying with the terms. So I think it's about, it's really important to have someone that understands the football world and how flexible we actually have to be around a footballer's commitments. Something you've probably seen in the press recently is a Schedule 1 claim in the Kyle Walker case. That's where, parents aren't married, but they have children, and if someone's earning quite well, and the other party is not...
Child support.
Yeah, it's a bit different to child support. So child maintenance is a different obligation, but a Schedule 1 claim is essentially financial support for the child or children until they reach a certain age. And if you're in a financially strong position and the other party is in a weaker financial position, that's something that we would see quite often. And I think some people think, well, I'm not married, I don't have to provide, all I need to do is pay child maintenance. But it's just being aware, if you are on quite a good wage or a good contract, that's something that you could be looking at, having an application made against you if you are to split up.
Some interesting. What for footballers, because maybe cohabitation might happen a lot, especially in these times where footballers might be wary to get married due to the statistics that we said. So those child situations are quite often happening. From just your perspective of working with different players, how would a footballer best use lawyers to help them through that situation?
With children it's a bit more difficult because that's more of a reactive measure that we would take. So when it broke down we would get involved, and we always say it's best for parents to do it themselves. There's new rules in the family courts now that we have to look at non-court dispute resolution. So we'd be looking at mediation, arbitration, different things before you came to us to take you through court proceedings, but we can still assist with these other areas like mediation and arbitration. I would say for a footballer what would be most important would be either the prenuptial agreement, pre-marriage, or if you weren't looking to marry, a cohabitation agreement, or also our private client team offer a declaration of trust. And these are quite legal jargon terms, but what that means is if you have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, and you're looking to move in with them, and you contribute in different amounts to the deposit, and one of you is going to be contributing a lot more monthly to the property, if that relationship does break down, how will that be split? So you're not left in a dispute trying to argue who contributed what was agreed at the time of the purchase. So that can either be our family team that do a more detailed cohabitation agreement, or our private client team that do declaration of trust.
But how would that work, for example, if one partner contributed 20 or 40k, another partner contributed 10k to the deposit, they both live in the house and then they split up?
Yeah, so it's quite complicated, and I'm not a property lawyer, but if you had an agreement, like a cohabitation agreement or declaration of trust in advance, that would help resolve any dispute, because it would be detailed what was to happen on the sale of the property. If not, you have to come to a lawyer. You then might have to look at court proceedings if you can't agree, and that's where it gets messy.
And you end up spending double, triple the amount than you would if you got a declaration of trust, which clearly sets out in a document, so-and-so provided this, so-and-so provided this is going to increase by whatever index to go in line with sort of market inflation, and it's enforceable as soon as the property sells.
How do you have those conversations with your partner? Because it's like a lot of people see that you're preparing to fail, and it's quite because obviously if you're in the honeymoon period, everything's going well. I have friends that these situations happen, they're moving together, they're not thinking about anything like that. How do you, as from a footballer's perspective, bring up those conversations?
I think the main thing is not to think they're such daunting things. I've just moved in with my partner. We contributed separate amounts, and we had that conversation. Yes, I have the knowledge to bring that up, and I said there is this document which just writes down on paper, like you might keep it on a notes page in your phone. He contributed this, I contributed this. Should it ever come to anything, we've got that written down. It's just, you've just done that, but you've just signed it at the bottom. And
insurance.
And you can have that conversation, and your partner might say, no, I don't think the value is enough, it's different enough for it to be worth it. But if someone's contributing 100,000 and someone's contributing 15,000, well then that party is within their right to say, that's actually quite a big amount of money that I've been saving for this many years. Let's just get it on paper, just in case. It doesn't need to be this really scary, we need to instruct lawyers, we need to speak about this really serious topic. It's just a conversation over the sofa.
It's not personal, it's business.
And speaking from a family point of view, with the cohabitation agreement and prenuptial agreement, you would both have lawyers.
Yeah.
So the wife would have a lawyer, the husband would have a lawyer. We work really closely with the other.
Does that
No,
not
because we
cause
try, this is
division?
probably one positive of our job. We're helping people get married. We're helping people
Okay.
move in together. We're not looking, it's all gone wrong and now we're looking to negotiate finances. So we work really collaboratively with other lawyers who are used to, drafting prenuptial agreements, and it's not a fun experience. I can't promote it that much, but it's not. There's no animosity there. You hope you just put it in the drawer and you forget about it and you never have to use it, but it's there in case you do need it.
And I think it's when you're oblivious to what goes on because you haven't had those situations happen. We're working in a law firm where those situations are coming up all the time, and you realise how easy those things come around. You're in a very loving relationship, and then all of a sudden this happens and you think, why didn't I protect myself? And it all happens very quickly, and you don't want to be kicking yourself, that you didn't consider.
Are you sure you're a lawyer? Not a saleswoman. Are you sure?
Being a lawyer is both.
Oh, really? Oh, you'd be an amazing saleswoman. I won't lie to you. That is top tier. No, calm. Let me be serious. But yeah, just to wrap up, man, I have some questions for you guys, just based on all the different topics that we spoke about. So for Molly, I'd like to just get insight into, just for female footballers that navigate in the football world and obviously their identities beyond it, different career paths. From your experience of obviously managing, playing football since the age of 6, refereeing, and then being here at BP Collins, what advice would you give to female footballers?
I think if you're enjoying it, continue. It can work alongside your career. There are hundreds of ways to intertwine football into your life. It doesn't have to just be playing. I think sometimes throughout my journey I've almost felt like an imposter to claim I like football if, for this period I didn't enjoy it, or I didn't actually watch that game on the weekend and I don't know the score. Sometimes I think there's this narrative that as a female, if you're into football, you have to be obsessed with it. You don't, and I found ways to fit it into my lifestyle. It was a part-time job for me growing up, and now it's a way that I'm really passionate about my legal career, and I get to meet great people like you guys, and just explore how you can use football in a positive way.
Amazing. It's amazing. And I think off the back of that, what kind of what do you see the future of women's football looking like in the next 5 to 10 years from a legal stance?
I think it's massively going to blow up for the good, not bad. And I think a lot more resources is going to start being pumped into it. I think we're going to see a lot of law firms now starting to get a lot more work in the female football space, which is exciting, and just more exposure to what's going on, and hopefully work towards bringing it up in line with the males game.
No, definitely. That would be amazing, man, because there's a lot of, you've seen the rise of female football and how valuable it is, not only for society but for entertainment, the amount of amazing footballers out there. So I'm looking forward to the developments there. And then for Emma, just to wrap up, being a wife to a footballer, being on that journey with him all through the career path. You said he's been at Oxford for over 10 years now, but also pursuing a career in law, from starting in college, studying it, navigating those different transitions through clubs, and then finding family law. What would you say to a young Emma embarking on a journey, being pursuing her own career, but also being immersed into this uncertain world of football?
I would say just take the highs and lows as they come, and you really can have it all. That sounds so cheesy, and I don't mean that, you know, you're not going to be happy and positive every day, because challenges with trying to have a career in law, especially as being a mum, you know, I started out when my youngest was 9 months old, then had another child in the middle of it. I certainly did not do it the easy way, especially with Si's career added on to all of that. But if you are, you know, if you're with a footballer and you want to have a career and you think, I could never be a lawyer, we're going to have to move around, I need to put their career first, it's really not true. You can compromise and you can have both. And I would just say enjoy the journey, because we're nearly at the end now. And looking back, you see a lot more of the highs than you do the terrible moments.
And we'll probably miss it when it ends.
That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
That's amazing to hear. It's amazing.
And I'm excited to finally have Christmases together.
Holidays out of season.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, he's not retired yet. I shouldn't be talking like this. He's definitely going to go through sport.
No, that's amazing.
That's amazing.
But I'd like to say
No, I was just going to ask if there was one short piece of advice that you'll give to footballers from a law perspective, what would it be?
I would say treat it like you do an agent, treat it like you do your injury insurance, find someone that you can relate to, that you can get on with in a firm like us, like a multi-service firm that offers everything to stand you in good stead to protect you, to protect your relationships, you know, assist you when things go wrong, and then you've always got someone in your corner.
Yeah, and similarly, just have autonomy, you know, think about what you want from things and build your circle to support you rather than relying on people that might not have your best interests at heart.
Oh, powerful. Really being proactive, taking your life into your own hands. You know, where's the responsibility lie?
That's the question.
Footballers need to really not be reactive, but gain knowledge as to the different services, industries in which are out there that can help you go beyond football. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you for having us in your amazing studio. I hope you guys like this setup, man. I hope you guys like this setup. You know, BP Collins, ex Beyond Football collaboration. It's great to see that we've made it a reality, something we've been discussing and working on. So yeah,
thank you.
Any last words?
Thank you for having us. It's been fun, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Nice. I hope we've inspired you guys or you, Emma, to create that podcast, giving wide. Make sure. No, but the thing is, I think you should give beyond wags. No, I'll get
not again.
But yeah, giving women an insight into what it looks like to get into the world of a footballer and actually go on that journey alongside, and showing that it's possible to have a successful career alongside doing that, which is often not shown in the media. So hopefully that we see that soon. Yeah. But yeah, make sure you guys check BP Collins out, their website online. Let me make sure I get it right. It's bpcollins.co.uk. Boom, we got it right. And then check out Molly, check out Emma on socials. But we can't say that, they're lawyers.
Game changer.
Yes, check out Molly's website, The Game Changer, where she gives you insights into sports law. And yeah, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. You know, we had a little bit of technical issues, so there's gonna be some exclusive snippets on Spotify and Apple Podcasts just alone. So make sure you guys check us out on there. And yeah, check out our website, beyondfootball.uk, and join us on this journey of continuing to highlight the importance of having an identity beyond football. We brought you agents, parents, we've had scouts on, investment bankers, people who have, who are footballers and have six-figure businesses, business owners, counsellors, psychotherapists, and now we've brought you lawyers, giving you guys insights into how lawyers can really bring you and take you beyond the game. So yeah, thanks for listening, and till next time.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Cut. Bye.